What's up, and welcome to Unmotive Show. Today we're going to speak with Miriam Trahan about a topic that is closely related to mental health. Meditation and meditative breathing are the topics for today. These methods of spirituality are ways to improve your mental well-being and heal through holistic health. Miriam has studied the art for over 10 years and also has a yoga teaching certificate. She also hosts a meditation podcast called Miriam's Meditations. Hi, Miriam. Thanks for being with us today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Yes. So this season is on mental health, and I wanted to have a chance to talk about the less classical topics within the theme. And I feel like meditation definitely fits the bill.
Right. Well, meditation, being able to have a peaceful relationship with your own mind is very important to being just a generally healthy person, especially to having good mental health. You have to have a relationship with yourself, right? And we think of ourselves as our mind and the things we think about really important to our sense of who we are.
Yeah, I've learned a little bit about that in the past. Like they talked about mind, spirit, and body, and it was in a class I took. So I feel like that's the same similar modus operandi or mode we're talking about. Like I know you talk about consciousness and also energy too. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Well, consciousness is being aware, but it's also being conscious of something is to know it, right? And I like to talk about consciousness as opposed to thinking or um, I don't know, this is sort of an unusual place to start. Let's just back up a minute and talk about what meditation is and what it's
Okay,
not. All right.
sure.
So some people think that meditation is doing nothing, and it sounds really boring. Also, it's really hard because making your mind shut off and stop thinking is a very challenging thing to do. Meditation is more than just being quiet within. When we set up to meditate and we actually get the hang of it, you're changing how your brain is working in the moment. If you're busy doing things, running errands, working, etc., your brain is working in a certain way. You have a certain wave pattern of your brain. When you sit and do meditation, if you're successful at it, your brain waves actually change. And so it's what I call a field of meditation. Your brain is always emitting a certain amount of energy, an electric, bioelectric field that's emitted by your brain, by your thinking. And that field changes when you meditate. That's why it's easier to learn to meditate with a group of people who are successful meditators, because they are creating that field with their brain. And when you join in as a novice meditator, you go, oh, this is what they mean. So it's not just being quiet or doing nothing. It is quiet is important in the beginning when you shift to a meditative state. But when that happens and you become quiet, something else starts to occur. You find that there's something greater than your ordinary self, their everyday self that you think of as you, that there really is more to you. There's more to all of us. And that's consciousness. That's your greater self, your greater interior being, where your wisdom is and where your best thoughts are and where your good ideas come from. That's your greater consciousness. And so when you become successful at meditating, what opens up for you is this deeper knowing of who you truly are. And it creates a different feeling of being inside your consciousness. It's more expansive. It's quieter. It's sometimes it's very lively. Sometimes you'll get a lot of really good inner information, but it's different than your ordinary mind chatter about things you worry about, stuff you regret from the past, errands you have to run, all the ordinary stuff our mind usually does. This field that I'm talking about, when you get into the meditative energy, it's very different than that. It feels different. And it allows you to know yourself at a different level, at a deeper level, beyond all the mind chatter. So that's consciousness as I define it.
Okay, so it sounds like it's a little bit of the talk about auras as far as what you first mentioned about being in the group. and also consciousness. I've heard a little bit about that from studying like Buddhism, and also like some other teachers who do meditation, about how you have to quiet your inner mind to hear your like center, and you have to center yourself, stuff like that. And so it sounds like that's similar to what you're talking about. Uh, and I also wanted to say that the idea of consciousness is also kind of mistaken as like something from psychology, right? So, it's like it feels like what we're talking about is a lot different.
Well, I think that that's a good point. I mean, consciousness is a term that's used in psychology, but I think it's mainly meant to talk about your mental habits and your personality and what we generally think of as our ordinary everyday self. But they're different levels of consciousness. The consciousness that I'm speaking of tends to be more along the lines of what some people might describe as your spiritual nature. That part of you that's greater than your ordinary self, that deeper knowing that comes from knowing yourself at this deeper level. And it doesn't necessarily have to have a religious overtone. It's not necessarily connected to a particular religion or a dogma or some particular belief pattern that you have to have. It's something else entirely. It's more of a kind of sublime state where you enter into this expanded realm where you are much greater, you are your much greater self than you ever knew before. And when you spend time in the quiet in this way and open to something more expansive, you begin to have experiences there that enrich your life. They make your life greater, and you bring that energy back into your ordinary life. It's not like it's just this thing you do over here and it really doesn't have any bearing on your life. One of the things that I find when I do, especially early on when I was learning to meditate and just beginning to meditate, I was a very type A personality, speedy, lots of activity, always a lot going on. And so when I would sit to meditate, that's what my brain was used to doing. So it was really hard to get it to be quiet. Just stop talking to me all the time. So one of the first things that I did was I got a pen and a piece of paper and I put it down next to my chair where I was sitting to meditate. And so when I would stop doing anything and I would do my breath exercises, it seemed like my brain had a lot of things it needed to tell me. And some of that stuff was pretty important. So I just wrote it all down, just whatever it was. I just kept writing until it stopped. And then when I went back to just breathing and trying to meditate, sometimes my brain would start getting busy again. And I'd say, I wrote that all down. I put all that on that piece of paper. So I don't have to think about that right now. I know it's right there because a lot of that stuff, like I said, was important things I needed to remember. So it was kind of a dumping out. The ordinary mind you have to get past all of that. So one of the first things I did was I just wrote it down. And then when I did that for a while, I began to notice that there was something else behind that. There was a quiet space when I dumped all that stuff out and put it on the piece of paper. I could just relax. I didn't have to keep remembering all those things. I didn't have to keeping my mind very busy. And I began to find a quiet that was unfamiliar and new. And for me, being very busy um, meant I was not bored. I don't like being bored, and most people don't like being bored. And it seemed like peacefulness and quiet would not be very interesting. But what I found was that peacefulness and quiet was very dynamic. And while it seemed like it was quiet, there was quite a lot going on. And I could listen for my deeper inner knowing by having emptied out all of that ordinary stuff out of my brain. And I began to become more friendly with myself and have these experiences of these more spiritual realms, this more spiritual energy, peacefulness, quiet, compassion, joy, happiness, those lovely qualities, beauty. Beauty is a wonderful thing to think about in a meditative state. So after you've got your piece of paper and your pencil and you've emptied your brain out, you wrote all that stuff down, and now you're sort of in a now what kind of scenario, you could just rest your mind on beauty. Beauty is everywhere. It's in everything. It's just one of the main tenets of our reality, which to me is really fascinating, that beauty would be so prevalent. And so or harmony, you can rest your consciousness on these beautiful qualities and you begin to feel them in your energy field. And then when you step out of your meditation and go back to your regular life, what I found was that the world was more beautiful. The world had more harmony. And I had carried these qualities that I had cultivated with my attention just by paying attention to them. I had cultivated this and brought it out into my everyday life, even just for a little while. And then over time, it starts to sustain and carry forth. And so now you've changed your life from the inside out.
Right. So I feel like that's something that definitely can be attributed to mental health. That could help with mental health, joy, harmony,
Mm-hmm.
calm. Um, in a sense, also beauty, because being able to see your surroundings in a more harmonious light would probably help somebody's mental health, depending. And they often teach us stuff in various mental health practitioners teach meditation and breathing. I actually had some experience with this in the past with a therapist, and we joined together and did breathing exercises and meditations.
Nice.
And it was helpful at first, but I had a hard time. I had a hard time staying with it and keeping the habit up. So let's talk a little bit about like what meditation is and like how you practice it, maybe a little bit, and how you make it a habit.
Good question. Well, in the beginning, many of the practices talk about discipline, but I like to talk about momentum. You have a certain amount of momentum on all the things that are important to you in your daily life. And that energy is kind of an energy field of itself. Like I always do this and then I do that. And then I think about these things and then I have these reactions. And then next thing you know, your day is over. So, in order to create momentum for something like a practice, something that you're spending time on doing it by yourself, you have to set the energy of your space and the practice itself. You have to invent a practice that works for you. So here's what I recommend. Get your pen and your piece of paper because you're going to need that. And then I suggest that people pick a piece of music that has no words. It's just something beautiful and melodious and hopefully goes on for like 10 minutes or so, something long, or something that you can put on repeat that plays again. Because what you want to do is use this piece of music just for your meditation, not for anything else. So I sort of stumbled onto this accidentally when I first started to learn to breathe. I was very passionate about it and I really wanted to do it, but I was busy like everybody else and it was hard to get started. And so I just found this piece of music that I liked and I would play the piece of music and I would sit down and I would get ready to do my breathing exercises and I would play the music. And what happened was kind of a surprise that my body recognized the music as when I did my meditation and breathing work. And so
Makes
the
sense.
music created a container for me so that my body was now my friend. Instead of wanting to go and do all these other things, my body was now habituated to that piece of music and this practice. And so now it began to help me. And I began to build momentum on this practice. And it did not take very long where I needed to practice because I felt so much better after I did my practice. And my breathing exercises, the practice that I was taught was like 25 minutes long every day. It was hard to commit to that much time. Sometimes I only did 5 or 10 minutes. I would just do the very beginning. But I'll tell you, sometimes my practice was just sitting down and crying for 5 minutes because it brings up a lot of stuff. Your emotions are very powerfully linked to what you think about. And when you think about certain things that bother you that you haven't resolved, you feel a certain way. And if that emotional energy is not dealt with in some way, it's just going to keep coming back. So the important thing to do is recognize that when you create this quiet space, you're going to feel stuff. You're going to think about stuff that you've never made space to think about or feel before. And if you have a therapist, great. Go to the therapist and work this stuff out with that person. Or if you don't, write it all down on your pad and think about why you feel the way you do. What are the thoughts that you're having? create that feeling, because it becomes a cycle. You think this thing, then you feel this thing. Oh, now you think that thing again. Now you feel that thing again. And you're caught in those patterns. And they run in the background all the time, like bad software on a computer. It's always there, and it's causing you to distract from your purpose and the things you really want to do with your life. So when you sit to meditate or do breathing practice, whatever your practice is, you listen to your piece of music, you write these things down, you begin to come into an awareness of all this stuff that's been kind of running in the background all this time. And you sit with it. You feel it. You cry, you get angry, you're like, okay, there are these feelings. And begin to look for processes and ways to untangle those things and heal them. Whatever it is, if it's a therapist, if it's some other kind of training, if it's walking every day and to clear your mind, if it's some kind of other spiritual practice or a religion that you feel is very useful to you, there are many, many doorways to healing your inner being. But when you sit down, spiritual work is not for sissies. It's hard, but
Hmm.
it's so intensely rewarding because you clear all of this clutter out of your energy field. And over time, when you sit now, you have clarity. And it doesn't come back again and again. If you do think about it again, the next time it comes, it doesn't have the same emotional punch that it had before. It just doesn't. And over time, it starts to clear. And you still may have a memory, but it doesn't have the emotional hook that it used to have. And so now you can just be peaceful with it. You can release it. You can let it go. You can say, okay, that's just something that happened. I don't have to keep feeling the way I used to feel about this. And what you might find, what I found, was that my inner being began to give me guidance about those things that had been troubling me. And I was able to really release them and clear them, and then be of assistance to other people who were working through very similar kinds of issues, so that my experience had value, not just for me, but for others.
Yeah, I like how you said that you can bring up different emotions. Like, most people would think, oh, it's always going to be rosy and peaceful and joyous and make me feel better. But then, like, I guess not what I don't know if you mentioned that it was like only when you get started, the negative emotions may come up, but I've definitely experienced that because when I was starting, I actually went through a period where I would get all these memories from when I was a kid and they were very upsetting. And I would get angry, like so angry, I wanted to punch the wall. And unfortunately, that kind of led me to stop, decide to stop doing meditation and breathing exercises. So now that you said that, I'm like, okay, maybe I should have stuck with it, and maybe I should stick with it.
Well, this beautiful story, and I thank you for sharing that so honestly. That's challenging. And the what happened to you perhaps was that when you got to that place where these challenging emotions and thoughts came up, and I had a very similar experience. I grew up in a household with a very angry parent, and there was a lot of anger around, and there was no space for me as a child to be angry. And I realized that I didn't really know what being angry felt like until I began to do my breathing practice, and then I was angry for like a month. I was just angry for a long time, but it didn't have a place to go particularly. It just kind of came and it passed through me like a little storm, and then it would go away and I would feel like cleansed, like the anger had left me. But I
Hmm.
had support. I had a good therapist that I spoke with about the troublesome issues that came out of my childhood, and I was able to get some perspective. I learned some new tools. So in addition to doing these things, when that challenging material shows up for you, and it does still continue because we're still living our lives and challenges happen, that the peaceful periods got longer and longer. But there are still times when the emotions rise up, but I have so many more tools now to deal with them. I'm not afraid of my emotions anymore. I'm not afraid of my memories anymore because I know what to do. But I've worked at it. It's a process, but I'm such a better person for having done it. I'm more compassionate. I'm happier. I'm more creative. I'm more organized. I can move through the world in a much more joyful fashion much of the time. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. And for me, that's a big accomplishment. You're going to pass through these life moments, whether you get healed or not. You might as well do a little work that helps you have a better life on the inside of who you are. And all the people around you are going to benefit from that because you know that energy field we talked about right at the beginning?
Yeah.
You have that field no matter what. And if you do meditation practice, your field becomes more coherent. That means the patterns are more integrated. They are more harmonious. They are less jagged and less intense in a way that is unpleasant. And when you move about the world, you will bring this more peaceful pattern with you everywhere you go. And everyone who interfaces with you, even if they just pass you on the street, they will be experiencing some of what you are putting out as a human being. And this is how we begin to weave together a more peaceful world. It comes from inside of each of us.
Yeah, I think that sounds like your description of energy, right? We kind of touched on that at the beginning, but we weren't ready to talk about it. So that energy is like, from what I've heard, it's kind of like one of the things that attracts things to you. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's something that attracts things in the world. Like I've heard sayings, I don't know, that say that like in order to attract things you want in life, you have to change yourself first. And I feel like that's what we're talking about today. Energy, consciousness, and changing your inner self is one way to do that. I mean, maybe not the only way to do that, but it's one way to do that.
Right. And well, everything is energy. Everything in the whole world is energy. And so it's all a bunch of patterns of energy. And your pattern of energy is the complex that makes up who you are. And so as you do this work, as you work on yourself in whatever way you are drawn to do it, if it's meditation, if it's surfing. I used to live in Hawaii and I'd go down to the beach and watch people surf. And there was this kind of grace about it, being at one with the water and your surfboard and the exhilaration of that movement across the water. And the thing about surfing is if you tense up, you fall off your board. You really have to go with the flow. And so a lot of times I feel like we are so embattled and so tense up so much of the time that we can't perceive the flows of energy around us that are trying to help us, that are flowing with the things that we want to attract into our lives. And so you're right, you do have to start with yourself, whatever path you are using, whatever work you are doing. And that's what the Buddhists say, your point of view, your point of consciousness, you who you are, is the only place we can start. It's the very best thing. And so you begin to start with wherever you are, with whoever you are in this moment, and make peace with that. This is where I'm starting. It's just your starting place. And then you begin to do whatever processes or practices make sense to you. And then you might pivot to some new practice at a different time. You might find a new teacher. Things begin to show up for you. All of the desires and things that you want that are in line with your purpose or just ways that you want to be in the world are already in your consciousness. You've already thought about a lot of that stuff. And the way to align yourself with the energies of the world in order to make those things a reality have to start with how you are being in the world. And if you're just doing the same old things all the time, you're going to get the same old results.
Yeah, like I used to like the saying of growth, like personal growth and just growth in general, as kind of what we're talking about. And I feel like the way you put it makes it seem a lot more sensible because you have to start with yourself. You have to work at it, and it's kind of like a plant that starts with a seed and it grows into a tree. That's a good
Yeah,
metaphor for it, I think.
I think that's beautiful. I like that very much. And if you think about all the seeds that you have planted, with all
Hmm.
of the ideas that you have and all of the aspirations and the beautiful things that you'd like to draw into your life. All those seeds are right there waiting for you. And your practice is the water and the nourishment of those seeds. And the way that you think about them, the way that you move through the world, that's what's going to cause those seeds to uh, take root and grow and become the trees that are in your whole world and bear fruit. Then that fruit is what you're looking for, that fruit of that idea and the effort that you put into it. And now it bears fruit. And then now you can go on and plant new seeds.
Yeah, like that took the metaphor a whole nother step to this thought of planting your seeds, because seeds like spread and they grow into new trees themselves, kind of like the idea of like people you pass on the street also feel the energy that you put off in the world, put out in the world, and that everything's made of energy. It's kind of like, God made everything. And so everything that he made is energy, could be thought of as that way. Yeah. So I wanted to transition into talking a little bit about your story, how you were trained and how you learned about all these new experiences with breathing and meditation.
Well, I have a bachelor's degree in psychology, which I got in the 80s because I've always been interested in the life of the mind. And but I didn't find that it was quite going where I wanted to go. And so I went to work, got a job, and was in sales for a long time. But I was always still really interested in consciousness and how is reality constructed? How is it that certain things happen to us? And that was always a topic of fascination for me. So I had the good fortune to run across this breath teacher in the mid 90s. And she had studied in India for many years and was a very profound influence on my life. And I'd never even heard of breath practice before that. I'd heard of yoga and I'd heard of things like Tai Chi and those sorts of practices, but I never really heard of breathing as a practice. And so I went to her classes and was just fascinated from the beginning with how powerful breath practice was for me as a very agitated, anxious type A person who could not settle down or sit still. It was very, very hard for me to do that. And I had tried to meditate and practiced it and talked about it in my psychology classes, but really didn't make much progress. So when I found this teacher and she began to teach me, first we did breath awareness exercises where you simply watch how it is you're breathing. And then she taught us some things about how to make a more complete breath in the body. Where is the breath trapped in the body? Where is it not moving very well? And is your breath too shallow? Is your breath too fast? Is your breath only one part of your body? All of those kinds of breath awarenesses that was all very new to me. But as I watched my own breathing and began to relax into this practice, I realized that I really wasn't breathing very well. My breathing was very shallow. It was much too rapid. And just by slowing down my breath, by just slowing down my life and my body for a few moments every day, I began to unwind a lot of these old patterns of hypervigilance, always being ready for a disaster that I had learned in my childhood growing up in a very chaotic home. And and then we got into some of the deeper practices that were quite profound. And as I did the practices on a regular basis, I began to have a lot of these emotional reactions that we talked about earlier. But those eventually, the intensity of that passed. And what was left was like after a storm, and you go outside and the sky is all sparkling and everything is clean. And there's kind of this sense of spacious openness and promise because the rain has fallen and the plants are all happy because it rained. And it was like, oh, I felt like I was having the best breaths I'd had in decades, that I was breathing better than I had in such a long time. And breath, we all breathe every day, whether we're aware of it or not. It seems like such a very simple thing. But there is a quality of life vitality of what's called prana or chi in some practices. My teacher called it prana. Is a life force that draws into your body with your breath. And that when you open your body to a better quality of breath that's more balanced for what you're doing, that's more fluid and open, you get more of this prana or life vitality into your body, into your emotional body, into your mental body. And all of that starts to just work better. And you move through life with a greater sense of ease that I had not known was really possible. So it was this wonderful discovery that this very simple thing of learning to breathe better and doing these just the beginning practices, not even particularly advanced breathing practices, but very simple breathing practices, could lead me to that mysterious meditative state that I had been trying to find for such a long time. And there it was. I just did the breathing practice, and there was the meditation space. And I was so surprised that this could happen to me. And I just never let it go. I've just done it now for, 25 or 30 years I've been at it. This is my life, that I do this breathing practice, I do this meditation. It is the core of my spiritual work and very much a part of who I am.
Okay, so that sounds like something that I would like to work on myself. Like I said, I've done it before, but it hasn't been very, I've had negative experiences with it, so I stopped. So I'm glad you were able to have such a positive experience and it was able to fit so well into your life. You were able to even make I don't know if you get paid to train people or you have a podcast and you just help people via the digital on demand realm. Like, what are you doing right now, at least professionally, with what you've learned?
Well, at this point, my offering is on my podcast, Miriam's Meditations. And I have episodes up. I've been at it for a couple of years now, and there's no charge. It is an offering I give freely based on my experience. But here's what I've learned about spiritual practice is that when you deeply commit to your spiritual practice and you begin to get this kind of elusive power of spiritual light, this clarity, this beauty, this harmony, is that it needs to go somewhere. It needs to be shared. It's not something that you gain and then you just sort of keep it in your pocket. It flows through us. It's a powerful force of nature. And so as it moves through me, it needs to go somewhere. So for me, I'm offering it on my podcast because I really love sharing it. And it's a source of real joy for me to know that it's a way that people are helping themselves. Now, you're just to return briefly to your negative experience, and I'm glad you brought that up because it's very important to recognize that you are in the driver's seat with your spiritual practice. And if something is uncomfortable for you and you're not having a nourishing experience, it's very important to pay attention to that. Either the
Mhm.
practice is not right for you, or it's not the right timing for you, or it's brought up things for you that you need some other kind of help with, that you might need a professional support of some kind, like a therapist or a guide, someone to speak with you about the things that this practice brings up. So it's very important that you said that because I very much want people to know that they shouldn't just push through it and ignore those signals from inside, that you should listen carefully to what your inner being is telling you. And if you are in distress about it, then stepping back for a moment is probably exactly what you need to do and find some assistance so that you can learn to cope with the things that happened to you as a child or any other kind of trauma that you've experienced. We all need somebody sometimes. And there's a lot of help out there these days. You can get telehelp fairly inexpensively online. You can connect to a therapist online that can help you with the issues that this brings up. So that's what I'm doing with this particular practice. And I will say this also about breath practice is that it's cumulative. So if you look at my podcast, for example, in the beginning, I did a lot more explaining about the breaths themselves and how to do the breaths. And if you're going to listen to my podcast, I would recommend that you start close to the beginning in season 1 and listen to some of the podcasts there, because there are a lot more instruction. And then maybe see what's happening in season 2, 3. I'm in season 5 now, but they took me roughly 6 months or so to do each season. So you don't have to listen to absolutely every episode, but it will help you in the practice if you start closer to the beginning and recognize that it's cumulative. You learn the basics, and then you do them, and then you learn a little bit more, and then you do that. So it's important to understand how this practice works.
Okay, so people can kind of get an idea of how to do it from your podcast. And I guess you explain in the earlier episodes, you kind of have a progression with it. That's
Right?
really good. So maybe I'll tune in and try to get back into it. I know I'm going to definitely call you. You made me want to call, because after the negative experience that we were talking about, I kind of put everything down. I never talked about it again. So like I did take a break, but I didn't come back to it and address it later. So I'm actually going to call somebody and talk it over with
Great.
them and try to have a meeting with them.
Wonderful. Good for you. I'm so pleased that we are having this conversation and that you've been so honest and straightforward about your personal experience, because that really helps people, and it really helps me to help people understand that breath practice can really stir up a lot. It's so powerful. People don't understand it until they start to do it, and that getting some assistance with what it stirred up, and also just breathing with the group, look around and see if there's anybody doing any kind of breath meditation or even just a meditation practice in your neighborhood. It's really lovely to meditate with others. It's just, it makes it so much easier to sit with people who have a meditation practice to figure out what it's all about. It's kind of hard to get started by yourself sometimes, but when you listen to my practice, I teach this class as a live class with a handful of very practiced meditators. And so when you listen to my voice, know that there is a whole group of people that are meditating with you in the inner planes where there's no time, and we're all there together in this marvelous place in the inner realms. So there's a meditative field that's set up already for you, makes it a little easier to practice.
Yes, yes. So thanks for that. That's a good resource for everybody, including myself. So I think that's all the time we have for today. But I wanted to thank you for sharing everything you shared today, and I hope it helps somebody out there get into the practice and also get some good stuff out of it.
Thank you, Rotimi. This was really a lovely conversation. I really enjoyed speaking with you today.